Hello, everybody. This is Susan Heaton-Wright and Nick Simon from SuperStar Communicator. Honestly, we are for a massive treat this afternoon. We have Greg Williams, the master negotiator and body language expert. Greg is a people person. I know because I've met him in person. And also, we've been speaking before this presentation, who cares for the well-being of others. That's why he teaches people how to negotiate while reading body language to increase their value and get more from every negotiation. And he has presented negotiation and reading body language training and consultations to people in 14 countries. Greg is a Harvard-trained negotiator with a wealth of 30 plus years, you don't look old enough, of negotiation and reading body language experience. Known as the master negotiator and body language expert, he is an accomplished author, speaker, trainer, and a recognized worldwide thought leader on negotiation and reading body language. The research firm Global Gurus has double ranked Greg in negotiation and body language among the top 30 gurus worldwide. Leaders Hum has named him in the power list of the top 200 biggest voices in leadership. Greg is also a member of the famed Marshall Goldsmith's 100 coaches, individuals who coach such people as Serena Williams, who I adore, Richard Branson, and other well-known, world-recognized public figures. In the capacity of TV news contributor, Greg has appeared in all US major TV networks and some in other countries. Greg has written 7 books about negotiations and reading body language, and currently he's writing number 8. Greg's motto is, "You're always negotiating." Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Susan. And boy, that was really a very enthusiastic introduction.
Well, it's well deserved, isn't it?
Well, if you say so, I'm modest. So
Oh. So before we start, what on earth is negotiation?
it's the interaction that people have to obtain an outcome that they seek. I mean, it's that plain and that simple. And as people engage in their daily activities, they are constantly negotiating for an outcome that they want. And thus, how you do so determines to what degree you are more likely to get it or not.
Do you know, it's really interesting that you say it's something that's every day.
Hmm.
Because so often we think that it's something that happens elsewhere, maybe in big businesses or in organizations, but not us. And therefore, we suddenly feel we've got to negotiate and gulp, but we're doing it all the time.
And that's the point that people should recognize, Susan, because anything that you do in the moment will give insight into what you might do in the future. So, a lot
Mm.
of times with clients, I will observe how they act in a normal environment, whatever is normal for them. And then I can assess how their mood is altered based on what stimulates them to make such alterations. And therefore, I can assess to what degree a particular negotiation tactic, strategy, offering has motivated them to adopt the posture and position that they now project. That's why you're always negotiating. You're setting that baseline in the moment from which that can be compared to in the future.
So, can you give an example of that?
Sure, we're negotiating right now. Okay.
We
If
are,
someone
aren't
comes in
we?
here, yeah,
We're
that's
working out
right.
who's going to speak next.
Yes, yes. By the fact that you and I are exchanging information, we're either building a bond of trust, which means if you and I engaged in the future, we have a basis for, well, I can trust Susan. Now, you're just a naturally wholesome, trustworthy person anyway. I already know that because you and I had interactions. Was it last year sometime in Ireland? And
Yes.
so I had that sense of who you were back then. To the degree that you are consistent with that, I can say she'll be that way in the future. And therefore, we are negotiating right now. And as you indicated a moment ago, people think, wait a minute, I'm not sitting down at a table. Susan's on one side of the table, I'm on the other side of the table, and we're trying to hammer out some type of an agreement. So, how can you say we're negotiating? Well, it's because of what I just said a moment ago. We're exchanging information that gives insights about the way we think, what we might do in a particular situation, and therefore that is part of the negotiation process.
Oh, that's so interesting, isn't it?
So if you say so, I say so.
But what are the benefits of having this knowledge or acquiring this skill?
Oh my goodness, they are a multitude. First of all, again, how can you get along better with people? How can you
Mm.
get people to help you with the causes that are most meaningful to you? Well, you do all of that through negotiations. What is it that I can offer you to get what it is I need from you? What is it that you will concede on as opposed to dig your heels on and will not go past a particular point? The way we interact will allow me to be able to gain more of what I want in order to help you get more of what you may need.
So therefore, do you think that it's a win-win for both people?
Ah, that depends. And it really does depend on what that other individual is seeking from you. So, if you and I enter into a negotiation for whatever outcome that we seek, and both of us are looking for benefits from it, and yet I take the position of, well, Susan, I need 80% of whatever that outcome is. I'll give you 20%. Now, you even notice my demeanor with that. I'll give you 20%. Just waving you off, even with the body language. And we'll talk about body language in a moment. I'm setting up the scenario whereby I'm going to be a lot tougher in a negotiation, which may or may not cause you to reciprocate in kind. Meaning, well, Greg, the heck with you. I'll give you 10%. I'll take 90. Okay, so that becomes a combative environment. A win-win would be one whereby both of us are happy with the outcome. Susan, the point of that is both of us may be happy with the outcome of 80-20 because of future offerings to come. At the same time, it could be a win-lose proposition if we're not aligned with that outcome.
Great. And furthering on from that, what would you say is the best balance between a sort of confident demeanor and an unconfident demeanor when you approach negotiating?
And Nick, excellent question. It's what the parties agree on.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, again, if I know, again, it goes back to past negotiations or past observances of your behavior in certain situations. If I know, Nick, that you are a go along to get along type of individual, and I'm seeking a win win outcome for both of us, I'm going to adopt that persona. Go along to get along. I'm going to make you feel comfortable with me. That's the demeanor I will bring to our negotiation offering. If, on the other hand, I see that you're the dogmatic type, the type that will eat my lunch if I leave it out too long, I'm going to protect my lunch. And I'm going to come at you as though, don't you dare go anywhere near my lunch, type of thing. So the demeanor truly does determine on how you wish to position yourself, number one, how you wish to be perceived by the individual with whom you are negotiating, and what such positioning will do per how you engage in the negotiation process. Excellent question.
You.
Here in the United Kingdom, there are a lot of strikes at the moment.
Mm.
Now, obviously, I don't want to go into anything political. However, there is one side that is saying, we want to negotiate, we want to get round the table. The leaders of, because it's within the healthcare sector, the leaders of the healthcare sector also saying, let's get around the table, let's get an independent party to negotiate. And the government are ignoring it.
And no. I left that pregnant pause there for a reason. I left that pregnant pause there for a reason.
And what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, and Susan, I'm going to answer that question in a moment. But seriously, that pregnant pause, there are times when people just don't feel overly comfortable with silence in a negotiation. So you can just sit there and just wait. And someone will start talking. When they start talking, they do give additional information. That's
Yes.
just an aside. Okay, now, there are power strategies that people can employ in a negotiation. The government may be doing just that. Like, okay, so you want to get around the negotiation table and start negotiating? Uh, okay, we'll get around to it. Hey, come on, let's start negotiating. Let's get around the negotiation table. Yeah. What time might be good? The point is, sometimes you can use a stall tactic to increase the tension within the other negotiator and make that individual or entity apt to make more concessions once you do start negotiating. Uh, Look at what's going on in France right now as an example. I mean, my gosh, think about it. Raising the retirement age from 62 to 64, people go, okay, that's 2 years. And it's like, no, are you serious? Okay, it's a done deal. No, it's not a done deal. Yes, it is. No, it's not. So you have people out there really just rioting and so forth and so on. Why? Because they know it's a done deal. Yes, it will be raised to 64, but at the same time, the situation is such as we'll show you the cost that you have to bear as the result of raising it from 62 to 64. The same thing may be happening right now in the UK with the situation you just cited.
Without getting political.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, thank you. I was going to say, I thank you for bringing me back to that. Because I said to myself, not to get political. I'm like, okay, what did she just do? But again, it's an excellent way to position something too. Well, we're not going to talk about politics, but what about the strike that's going on? I love it. And Susan, let's talk about the body language aspect of what something like that does. Someone says, well, we're not going to talk about politics. And then the question comes in. Suppose I had said, you said we're not going to talk about politics, so let's not talk about it. Now, those that were being observant may have seen the fact that I actually leaned back when I made that statement. And by leaning back, it's literally saying, I don't want to get but so close to that statement, which is why body language is also so important to observe in negotiations, even to the degree that you're not physically with someone and can see their emotions, their actions. You can hear what they're thinking at times. A pause again. Is somebody thinking about something that you said? What does that mean? Might be a question. And people going, is something wrong with the audio? No, nothing's wrong with the audio.
Do you think coughing and things like that or clearing the throat?
Susan, excellent question. The body always attempts to stay in a state of comfort. That means anytime the body feels uncomfortable, it's going to do something to compensate for that feeling. And thus, if the throat gets tight, you may see people actually trying to clear their throat. Why? Because there's tension starting to build in the throat area, and that's the body's attempt to clear it. Now, it can also be used as a ploy by some negotiators. Hypothetically, I'm looking for £1,000 out of a situation for those in the UK, $1,000 for those in the US that may be listening to this, and you're offering, let's say, 500, and you say, "Well, my best offer is 500." I go, now, I feigned, of course, that reaction, but it's still sending a nonverbal message that was verbal. That no, we're nowhere near coming to an agreement. So it can be used in all kind. Body language is so important, like I said a moment ago, in actually observing what happens in negotiation per what you don't hear.
And what happens if you've got somebody who's very aggressive? When is it right to leave the room?
Anytime, anytime you feel threatened, that you think, again, I'm sending those nonverbal signals verbally that goes, okay, so you're threatening me. I don't feel comfortable with you. Anytime you feel as though your position is being weakened, you should think about getting away from the negotiation table. It may come in the form of, you know, oh boy, I just don't feel comfortable with the offer that you've extended. How might you make it better? And let's say, Susan, you said, well, the offer is what it is. I understand. It's what you say it is. Notice I'm changing it right there. It's what you say it is. How about if we reconvene next month, next week, whatever time frame I need to think about this. Now, time out. Several things have occurred there. Number one, I've repositioned it like, I'm not in a hurry to continue this. Something has to change. And we go back to leverage also at that particular point in time. Who has the leverage? If I know you're short on time and need to get this deal done, and even more so, I'm the only source that can provide it to you, I can then use time as my ally and say, well, let's come back once I've had a chance to think about it. I'm taking all your power away at that particular point in time. I'm taking all your power away. And I'm also saying to you, well, you need it more than I do. So you think about it. And actually, as an aside, something like that did happen once where someone in political power tried to bully me when selling a building. And the person said, well, I'll tell you, we can put this off as long as you want. And I said, I'll tell you what, I appreciate that offer. As a matter of fact, how about if we tell your client, I'm no longer willing to sell? And I don't like your demeanor, by the way. Talk with you later, maybe. Goodbye. And I hung up. I waited a day. And I said to myself, now he'll call back. I thought he would call back within a day. As it turned out, it was a day and a half. And he said, I'm so sorry that we misunderstood one another. My response was, we did not misunderstand one another. I was quite clear. It was your demeanor that I was not going to deal with. So did you tell your client that I'm no longer going to sell? He said, well, I had a conversation. I said, I'm sorry, I got to go. And I hung up. He called back within 15 minutes and said, look, we'll settle on your terms. And I said, well, my terms have changed. I wanted to play hardball at that point in time just to teach him a lesson. And I said, my terms have changed. He said, well, what are they now? And I gave him a new number. He even agreed to that number, which then said to me, he's willing to go a lot higher than even that. And I let him off the hook at that particular point in time. But again, you had to be mindful of how you approach people in a negotiation and how it is that you position yourself such that you either continue the negotiation, and if you don't feel comfortable, take a step back. Never be so fearful about a negotiation's outcome that you stay engaged. That could prove to be to your detriment.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, furthering on from that kind of numbers game, what does compromise mean to you when it comes to negotiating, I guess, high or low stakes?
Well, Nick, let me ask you a question. I thank you for that. First of all, what would you consider a compromise to be?
I guess it's situational. So if you're saying, let's help each other, and that's quite apparent, then I guess compromise would be quite easy. But when you're buying something from someone and it's a necessity, that would definitely make it less compromising from your point of view. So I get it, yeah, it's situational.
Do you think if you were less compromising in such a situation, it might prove to be to your benefit?
Uh, Certainly, yeah. Uh, Especially buying something, and you're trying to get something out of it. Yeah, but I
So,
guess depends on your relationship with the other person as well.
so if you were selling me something, how would you like me to compromise?
I suppose going with my first number, my first price, but then I guess there would be wiggle room
That
to
would be
go up or down.
that would be my compromise to go with your first number.
Uh, no, my compromise would be going for the lower number, I guess.
Okay. Now, you and I just engaged in compromising.
Yeah.
And that's why I went into that back and forth with the questioning aspect that I engaged in. If I understand how you wish me to compromise, which is what those questions solicited, I know better how to do so. And in a longer, drawn out situation, if again, let's go back to the 1,000 and the 500 number situation, you said something along the lines of after we went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, how about oh gosh, Greg, how about if we just split the difference and go at 750? And I'd go, that's what I'd do at first. Let the silence work. I'd let the silence work to hear what you would say. Because what I'm hoping you'll do is to say something along the lines of, uh, well, how about 800 then? How about if I give you 800 instead of the 750? I'd still use silence. And you say, how about if I give you 900? I might still use silence. Then if you said, how about if I give you the whole darn thing? And I give you the whole 1,000, I might still use silence. Or I might go, 1,000? Or I might go, Nick, I appreciate that. How much better can you do? Now, notice we've gone from 500 to 1,000. I've gotten everything I want. But at that time, I don't know to what degree I may be able to get more. Now, mind you, time out. Never be overly greedy in whatever it is that you receive in a negotiation. Because let's say you offered 1,500 in that particular situation. Okay, later on, you start to think to yourself, my gosh, we were at 1,500 and I offered an additional 1,000. Let me see how I can get out of this deal. So that's something that one always has to be mindful of also. If you set a goal per what you want to receive as the outcome of a negotiation, understand the compromises that you'll have to engage in order to get it, what that means once you get it, and what happens afterwards. And that's something people should always think about in a negotiation. What's next? Every time you make a step towards a completion, towards a goal in a negotiation, think about where that step will take you per you getting closer towards your goal or further away. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for the question.
Now, before we came on live, we were discussing about King Charles. For a moment, I forgot his name.
Oh
King
my
Charles. And the fact that there are going to be fewer people actually at the coronation than were at his mother's coronation, partly because of reduced numbers due to health and safety, but also he has a different mix of guests who are going to be there. What are your thoughts about that?
Number one, we go back to positioning. I'm not my mother. That's the message it sends immediately. Things are going to be different. Things are not going to be the way they were always done. Okay, so those of you that got your nose disjointed or whatever be the case, may be a little upset right now, but things are going to be done my way. I'm the person that is king right now. And I think we should understand who the ruler is going to be. Now, to what degree does King Charles need assistance in the future from those that have their noses disjointed at this particular point in time becomes something that I'm sure he took into consideration. Because in making a decision as to whom to invite, whom to not invite, he had to think about the consequences of his actions. And he's shown through those actions, which we all show in a negotiation, what is most important to us per the outcome that we are actually seeking. So he's positioned himself to say, new person in charge.
That is so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the impression I get is that the last two coronations of his mother, Queen Elizabeth, and his grandfather, George VI, were very similar, which might have been because the Queen was very young when she came to reign and didn't yet have her own vision of her reign.
And that's exactly what I was going to comment on. So did you catch something also body language wise? I was like, yeah. You know, it was right on. That's something to be aware of when you're in a conversation or whatever. To what degree have you really excited someone to be in agreement with the statement that you've made? It was like, yeah. And that's exactly right. And as I said a moment ago, King Charles is saying, hey, this is different. You know, I've waited around for decades to take the reins of power in this particular situation. And thus, I am going to show that I've been prepared for this. I'm ready for this. And these are the new rules of the game, as it were.
Do you have anything to say, Nick? Because I've got something else.
Yeah, I've got a question about body language. I've seen plenty of videos that go into body language in a perhaps over-the-top way, discussing about pupils dilating and that that kind of thing. But how far into depth would you say you should study body language when it comes to negotiating?
As deep as you can get. No, seriously, because there are a lot of cues that are issued through our body language. Now, I'll bring up my other hand. If I'm speaking like this, I'm speaking in tune with what I'm saying, which tends to lead or lend more validity to my words. I'm emphasizing points. If, on the other hand, I'm speaking somewhat like this with this tonality, I sound less confident because more than likely I am less confident. So even if one is not as confident in a situation, you can project confidence and sound like you know what you're talking about, no matter what the subject matter is, which is why it's very important to know more about body language from a negotiation perspective. Be you the person speaking at a particular point in time via the gestures you emit or listening. Suppose, Nick, you asked me that question, and I did like that, you know. Now you could interpret that like, are you serious? Or it could be one where, wow, he's contemplating my thoughts, you know, like that. Or he's getting ready to play with his ear for whatever reason because he can't hear what I'm saying. But the point is, you will have picked something else up about my demeanor per the question that you asked. And that's the point to always keep in mind. I said earlier, the body always makes an attempt to stay in a state of comfort. Observe what causes the body to emit certain actions and gestures. Thus, the more any negotiator knows about body language and nonverbal cues, verbal cues. Why did I do that? You know, just to be playing around. The more they will know about what's in the mind of that particular person with whom they're negotiating. Very good question. Thank you for it.
Thank you.
Anticipation. Did you see that with Nick?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nick.
We could carry on talking to you all day. I know, Nick, you would like it, but sadly, I'm aware that you are a very busy man and we're coming to the end of our session. Otherwise, I'm sure your assistant will be firing me from long distance. But what are your 3 top tips to share with the audience?
Number one, remember, you're always negotiating. I mean, I can't say that enough. Nick hit upon a factor a moment ago that bears repeating. learn as much about body language as you possibly can learn, because even when you are in an environment where you're just observing other individuals, you can get clues as to what they're thinking, the demeanor they have at a particular point in time, and you can use that information later on. Number three, always consider how today's action will position you for tomorrow's outcome.
Absolutely fantastic. And I know that my assistant will be reading through the transcription of this afterwards and scribbling this all down so that we can share it with
Mm.
everyone tomorrow. Do you have anything else to add? How can people contact you, Greg?
Well, thank you, because that's exactly what I was going to add.
Oh,
I love to give away stuff, and I mean give away as in FREE, free. So if people would like to learn more about how to negotiate better, how to read body language, they can go to themasternegotiator.com. That's THEMASTERNEGOTIATOR.com, and partake of all the stuff I have there for free. And I have downloads that people can use also that will give video insight about body language gestures that you should observe when you're actually engaging with people. So, Susan, thank you for that.
thank you for that, Greg. I know that people who have been watching this or watching on replay or as the podcast will be blown away by your generosity, your knowledge, expertise, and what you shared today. So thank you so much, Greg.
And thank you for the opportunity to both you and Nick. I really appreciate not only the questions, but the genuine good heartedness of the individuals that you are. Keep making a positive difference in the world, and we'll change the world together positively.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time, this is Susan Heaton-Wright and Nick Simon from SuperStar Communicator. Bye-bye.